Folks, it's just one of the reasons why the NFL is the greatest marketer in professional sports history. It's a Wednesday. It's May. It's nowhere close to the NFL season. This is a sport that hasn't played since the beginning of February and won't play a meaningful game until the beginning of September. And it is the sport that most recently had the national stage with its draft. And now just a couple of weeks later, I believe just 2 weekends later, the NFL once again has the spotlight of the sports world. The sports universe is watching the NFL because it's releasing its schedule. Does this matter? Should it matter? What can college football learn from it? Welcome to the Voice of College Football right here at MarkRogersTV, the Voice of College Football. We invite you in for the conversation. Our aim is to deliver the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. And this is a prime example how we do that in talking to you each and every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. So we've got the phone lines open and will for the next couple hours here at 860-499-3332. I would love to get your thoughts about the NFL schedule, not necessarily the 2021 NFL schedule, but the format, the approach, the marketing strategy, the release date, which is a marketing strategy, the approach of the NFL versus what happens in college football, where there is no approach, there is no system, there is no strategy, there is nothing but odds and ends scrambling, individual teams, individual institutions, football programs scrambling for games years and years away, 13, 15 years from now. So I will give my take, as I have many times on this matter, of the NFL schedule, the NFL schedule release. Those are two different things, the actual NFL schedule and the release of the schedule, and what college football can learn from the approach of the NFL, the greatest marketing giant in the history of professional sports in the United States. Again, 860-499-3332, and I will be unleashing my thoughts, as I have, again, many times on this subject. This is one of my favorite topics in college football, especially somewhat off the field topics, not talking about particular games or on the field personnel, but talking about the way the game is structured. I enjoy that conversation. I enjoy that debate. Welcome in here, everyone. Of course, ultimately, despite what the topic is here, despite what the topic is that I designate for that particular call-in show, you produce the show. You ultimately produce the show with your comments, your questions, your debate topics, and your calls at 860-499-3332. Before we display the phone number at the bottom of the screen on the ticker, we, of course, point you down below to that same ticker to let you know, because I don't think it has to be reminded to anyone to shop Amazon. But the reminder is that when you do shop Amazon, use the link in the description section that we provide. So go to the description section of any of the videos, grab that link, put it somewhere where you will remember it, where you will see it when you go do your shopping online at Amazon. Use the link that we provide and you help us build the channel. You basically are providing everybody else with content like this call-in show and everything else we do on a regular basis, because without your support, without your contributions, we will cease to exist. All right. So again, shop Amazon and do it using the link in the description section of the videos. It's the same exact shopping experience. It doesn't cost you an extra penny. Please use the link. All right. And as I heard on the radio today, and I think this came from Liberty, 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 Liberty. I think they repeated it like 8 times. And then they let us know that Effective advertising continues to repeat the same message. So shop Amazon, and when you do, use the link in the description section of any of the videos. All right. And one other thing. When you shop Amazon, use the link in the description section of any of the videos to help us build the channel. It's the same shopping experience. I'm going to unveil, as I have many times, so it's really not an unveiling. It is not an unveiling because it's been unveiled previously, but for those of you who have only been watching me for a short time or have not taken part in the schedule discussion, then for you, I will be unveiling my college football schedule release strategy. And then for everybody else, they will have to bear with me again. Mike 3883, good to see you. I can tell Mark is itching to discuss this topic. I am. I enjoy talking about college football scheduling. Phil B's on the line. Mark wants a college football playoff with buys. Exactly. What I would like to do is to reduce, if we could, if in a perfect world, if we could actually reduce the number of teams that make the college football playoff and also include buys, that would be perfect. You know, why not have 2 teams? Let's reduce it back to 2 teams, give the number 1 seed a bye, eliminate the championship game, and then by process of elimination, the number 1 seed wins the national championship. Or we could truly do it in form with the way the College Football Playoff Selection Committee has performed through 7 years. We could do it this way. Let's reduce the college football playoff from 4 teams to 2. Seed the 2 teams, 1 and 2. And then let's, in honor of the selection committee's accuracy, award a bye to the number 2 seed and therefore elevate them to the national championship. Because the number 1 seed in the college football playoff has only won the championship 2 out of 7 years. Yes. Fortunately, Lewis, I'm not live from the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. If anybody out there wants to hear me rant and rail against American Airlines in particular, which I still have a fight on my hands that's in front of me, please check out my live streams overnight after enduring 31 consecutive hours from airports and airlines. I was either on an airplane or in an airport for 31 consecutive hours, which was going to be 37 consecutive hours, but I was able to squeeze on standby on a flight before the flight that I was designated and ticketed to take, the rebooked flight. I was able to get on a flight before that, fortunately, and get the heck out of Big D. Thank you, Lewis. Glad you could join us. Talk is Pitt. Good to see you as well. D-Rock Irish, who's doing a heck of a job reminding me of a number of items in college football on my DM on Twitter. So D-Rock Irish, first of all, I want you to know thank you. Secondly, I would also like you to understand that most of those items I'm not going to move on because they're not necessarily items of note for what we do here, but I still appreciate those news items because I will certainly jump on and run with what we need to analyze and talk about with you. Let's get our number up here. It is 860-499-3332. There it is. Of course, we would ask that you would subscribe. We got the super chat available a little bit later in the show. Brent Baird from First Coast News and College Sports Today will be joining us. I'll have to remember to get him the link, and there you go. And of course, I'll be posting your comments off the feed all night and responding to your questions and comments concerning college football. And on the phone at 860-499-3332. We uploaded a video the other day on our top 5 quarterbacks in the ACC. I've started working on the top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC and the Big 12. I am going to, as long as they're well received, I am going to break down the top 5 at every positional unit in every conference, Power 5 conference in the country. Going to go to every Power 5 conference and break down the top 5. We are going to have a number of exciting adjustments made to the channel and our entire platform upcoming that we're going to discuss on a Patreon coming up this Saturday. Join us on Patreon for 15 cents a day. I lied, 16 cents a day on Patreon. 16 cents a day on Patreon. Just go to Patreon, search MarkRogersTV, or you can just go to the description section and grab the link next to Patreon. You can get 20% off Manscaped, plus the free shipping. Use the promo code MARK1 at manscaped.com. First-rate product. There it is. I highly recommend it. It's smooth. It's safe. It's clean. Good stuff. Manscaped, plus the free shipping and the 20% off. Use the promo code MARK1 at Manscaped. Okay. Not getting any comments and questions, not getting any phone calls, so I guess you're going to have to hear my college football scheduling plan and how college football needs to take a page from the NFL. And a lot of college football fans, as soon as they hear me say anything about the NFL and duplicating what's done in the NFL, just cringe. And I get it. College football needs to stay unique from the NFL. This has nothing to do with being like the NFL, but it has to do with looking at what the NFL does successfully and what makes sense and what is good for the sport, and saying, okay, we're not going to do it like them, but like them, we're actually going to approach this systematically. None of this is going to get accomplished without a governing body in college football. I think the pandemic showed us more than anything else in college football that the conferences themselves work unilaterally. They communicate to certain degrees. Some of them communicate more effectively and more frequently with certain conferences. Let's say the ACC and the SEC more so than other conferences. Let's say the Big Ten and the Pac-12 more so than, let's say, the Big Ten and the ACC, or the ACC and the Pac-12. So the conferences work independently, unilaterally, and they communicate at various degrees. But there is no structure in place, and there is no governing body or commissioner to hold them together to say, this is what is going to be good for all and is going to provide the best experience for the student athlete and also for the fan and for the institutions themselves, for us to work together and accomplish all of this together. And therefore, we're going to approach this topic or this subject or this pandemic, this disaster, as it were, this situation, this adversity, the same way. They don't do that. And therefore, most of the proposals that I make concerning a college football playoff, concerning scheduling, both in conference and out of conference, will not be accomplished without a governing body in college football. It just won't happen. All right. Before I get into scheduling, we've got a call coming in. Looks like this is coming in from our guy, Jordan. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hello, Mr. Mark. This is Talk is Pitt.
Talk is Pitt. What's going on?
I'm doing pretty well, just getting off of work. It's been a long day.
Well, hopefully we can provide some little entertainment for you after a long day.
Oh, definitely. So I always like to talk about the football program, but I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the turmoil that's going on in our basketball program, we only have 6 or 7 players on our roster right now going into next season, and they're thinking about actually just shutting down the whole entire season for the basketball program if we don't get anybody. It's bad, really bad.
That's a shame. Why is that happening?
A lot of people are blaming it on Jeff Capel. We hired him from Duke whenever he was the assistant coach, and he's won more games than the 2 previous coaches before combined. I mean, the first year we had 16 wins. Last year, I think it was 14 or 15, and I really don't try to count last year because of COVID. Everybody suffered in any sport, no matter what it was. I don't know if it's necessarily Capel that's the problem, or it's just the self-centeredness of our players. I mean, it also didn't help that one of our players got arrested on a felony charge either. So that totally screwed everything up for us.
Yeah, it sounds like a rough situation, Talkers Pitt. I feel for you. I know that you love Pitt, both in football and now I know basketball. You also understand that we don't talk about basketball here, so I really have no response for you other than that's too bad, and that I can't imagine anybody listening is going to be too concerned with the Pitt basketball team. Got anything else for us?
Nobody's. Actually, yes.
Sure.
Since the ACC has a new commissioner, the ACC has a new commissioner. Do you see him expanding the ACC, like either having some teams move out, having some teams move in? And if that's the case, who would you have move out? Who would you have come in? And that would be my final question, and I'll let you go and go back into the chat.
Yeah, so basically what I would do, well, let me answer the first part of the question, which is based on the interview that he had with someone at ESPN that was online, just in reading between the lines, and he gave some type of indication that he was not necessarily in favor of expansion, but that it would be considered, that he would research it, look into it in terms of who the candidate should be, whether it would make sense for the conference, and that he was open to it. But he didn't say that it was a goal or a priority. If I was
maybe I read that wrong.
That's what I read on ESPN.com, is that he was basically open to it, that they would look into it. I guess that's even more so than just being open to it. Okay, what I would do, see, that's a 2-part question, because if I was in charge of everything, meaning all of college football, my approach would be different than if I was just the commissioner of the ACC, because if I was commissioner just of the conference, then I would just be looking out for the best interests of the ACC. Now, if I was in charge of all of college football, then I would be looking out for the best interests of the entire sport, at which time I would size down these conferences. They're too large. When you've got a 14-team conference and you only play 8 conference games, that means you've got 13 other possible opponents. You can only play 8 of the 13. Therefore, you miss 5 teams, and teams are only seeing 6 of the 7 opponents in the other division every 6 years. Which doesn't make any sense.
We haven't seen Louisville.
Yeah.
We didn't see Louisville until last year. Actually, I don't even think we played them in the ACC since we moved in. I'm pretty sure we haven't. That was last year was the first time we played them since we moved.
Exactly. So you've got to see Syracuse every year, and then the other 6 teams just rotate. And some of those out of division rivalries make sense, like North Carolina State, like Florida State and Miami, but most of them don't make sense. Is there a reason that Virginia Tech and Boston College play every year? They have absolutely no connection. So that doesn't make any sense. But for some reason, the ACC and the SEC have it in their brains that because they matched up certain rivalries cross division, that everybody has to be matched up with another team. And Texas A&M and South Carolina play every year. That makes no sense. So there's a number of those that don't need to be. They don't need to be matched up.
Go ahead. I mean, if they were going to go by that logic, wouldn't they have? I mean, I know West Virginia is not in the ACC, but wouldn't they have kept West Virginia and Pitt? I mean, that was like our moneymaker right there at the end of the season, no matter if we lost.
When you say they, who's they would have kept it?
Because when we moved into the ACC, we continued to play West Virginia for 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. That's because I think that's the contract we had.
Sure.
And then after that, we stopped playing them. And that's when I started noticing the publicity as far as the media around our program, football program, started to die down. Once we stopped playing West Virginia, nobody really talked about us unless we upset Clemson or Miami or even Louisville, which I had us losing that game too. We don't really get talked about. And I would really like the Backyard Brawl to come back permanently, not just for the next 4 years after this season, but, is for years down to come. Even the Penn State rivalry, I don't get how I'm only 2 hours away from Happy Valley, and we don't even play Penn State once every, 12 years?
Yeah, so I believe the last time you played Penn State as part of the series that was continuous year to year, I think was like 1999 or 2000. And then you didn't play them for a long, long time. And then you played them somewhere in the range of 2015, 16, 17, at least 2 consecutive years. I thought it was more than that. And then played them. You didn't play them, of course, last year, but played them either the year before, 2019 or 18. So anyway, you played 2 to 4 consecutive years recently, but that was the first time in almost 20 years that you had played Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought process about the
definitely.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say my thought process about the ACC, if I were commissioner of college football, would be to go to 6 12-team conferences and create a Northeast, Big East type of conference that would involve Syracuse, Pitt, Boston College, and Louisville. I think would be the 4 teams that I would take from I would take 2 more teams. Who else is up there? I worked all this out a couple of years ago. So I would take teams out of the ACC, and I believe those total 4 teams. So the teams that I just listed, the Northeast teams, Syracuse, Pitt, Louisville, and Boston College, and I would move them to the Big East. And I would have a conference with them and Penn State and all sorts of teams that I configured. West Virginia, and I would reunite all sorts of rivalries with that. West Virginia and Pitt, West Virginia and Maryland, and Rutgers would be involved, and so forth and so on. So I'm not going to go through all the teams, but there would be a Big East, Northeast conference, and then I would have 12 teams in the ACC because I would take out 4. And at the time I was going to add, now understand that this was a few years ago when South Florida was playing much better football and was playing well in the group of 5, but Central Florida and South Florida, I think, would be a natural fit for the ACC.
I actually agree with that. I always didn't understand why Central Florida didn't move up. I mean, they're good. I mean, we got lucky when we beat them 2 years ago when we blew a 28-point lead after halftime and had to use an NFL play to pull out the win on that.
Yep.
I don't think USC is a bad team. I think they should move up to a different conference, one that would make them, I guess you would say, national championship eligible. You know how they tried to claim a couple of years ago that they were the real national champions?
Oh, yeah.
Their whole entire fan base went nuts.
I don't blame them, actually. I don't agree that they were the national champion, but if I were them, I would have done exactly the same thing.
But yeah, definitely. I mean, if I would have won, I mean, Pitt ain't going undefeated anytime soon. But if Pitt were to go undefeated, I would have said the same thing. So yeah, I agree with you on that part. But I have to go, Mark.
Yes, sir.
What was that?
That was me copying a link to my conference realignment, at least one of a series of videos that I produced a few years ago. So I went through all the conferences, realigned all the conferences, and introduced my scheduling formula. So I was just copying and pasting that link. I left it in the live chat.
Okay, because I've only been subscribed to your channel for a little over a year, so I wouldn't even have seen that video.
Yeah, I went through all the conferences, and I came up with 72 teams, 12 teams in 6 conferences, and then addressed scheduling as well.
Okay, good. That's pretty nice. I'll definitely go and watch that right now while I eat dinner. But I'm going to let you go, Mark. I'm going to let other people get on, and I'll get back into the chat.
Good stuff. Always appreciate the call.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, talk is Pitt. Have a good one. All right, Troy V in the house with the transfer portal is one of those things that when it helps your team, it's awesome. When someone good leaves your team with it, it sucks. I kind of like it as it gives the player an option to play. This is a bit of a catch-22 for me because I think it's generally bad for college football. And when I say bad, I don't mean damaging bad, just to the point where it's just killing the game or anything like that. But I don't think that it's healthy for the game overall, but I think it's healthy for the individuals to a certain extent because we do live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and equal opportunity and ability to move. And therefore, I think that these people should be able to choose what they want to do and where they want to go play and attend school. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Hello? Did we have something move on us? Yes, sir.
Kevin, Dallas, Georgia. How you doing this evening?
Hey, Kevin. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, I'm glad to see that you're back and what's the term I want to use? Back home. I just use it that way. I was going to be smart aleck, but I'm not going to do that. Just glad to see that you're not in the airport. So, but now just as far as the transfer portal is concerned, I'm mixed emotion about it because obviously, hey, in this time it benefits the university in which I support. But the thing is, Mark, when it's all said and done, I mean, the rich are going to get richer. I mean, it's not going to hurt, as far as those schools that, because I mean, it would be like this, Mark. Okay, you put in 2 years at the Ohio State University, and that third year, the average 5-star or 4.5-star for that matter is looking forward to, after 3 years, putting their name into the draft. So you see the writing on the wall after spring game. And so then you have to make a decision. Okay, am I going to, fight the good fight for another season, or am I going to, look the greener pastures now, so that hey, after year 3, I can put my name into draft. So, I mean, when it comes to say your Alabamas, your Ohio States, your Clemson, those I call them the Big Four. This is not going to hurt you, Mark. I mean, as far as the transfer portal. I mean, it's only going to hurt as far as those schools that, hey. I just in a nutshell, Mark, I just see it not hurting as far as those big schools. Now, in some cases, I think it may hurt the kids because I think there may be times in which a student athlete don't have all the information necessary to make it. I mean, they just more so, instead of thinking, they're more so reacting. And so I would pray that as far as some of these student athletes have a support group or someone that, hey, can say, okay, John, Joe, this is how we should approach it before we go into the portal.
Here's what I would like to have somebody track. I would like to have somebody track when players leave particular teams, do they typically go to a program that is greater or lesser? Do they go to a bigger program or a lesser program? Because my thought would be, and I have nothing to back this up on, but this is just a theory, that it would actually work to a certain extent in reverse, meaning tons of 4 and 5 star athletes would sign at the type schools that you just referenced. And then they would find out after a year or two that they're buried on the depth chart, that they are the 6th wide receiver and they've got 4 and 5 stars ahead of them, and they're not going to get any more playing time. But they could go and they could leave said school, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, and they could go play at a mid-tier Power 5. They could go to TCU or Stanford or North Carolina State, and suddenly they're a big man on campus and they could get a ton of playing time, and they're still playing big-time college football, and they would tend to leave the huge programs because they're buried on the depth chart and go to a mid-tier program. That's what I thought was going to happen. Now, I've got nothing to either substantiate that or to say that that's not happening. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, Mark, honestly, you do know, Mark, in the respect of this. Okay, that's case in point with the University of Alabama. University of Alabama, in the past, I would say, I'm just going to ballpark it, say 3 to 6 months have had 5 guys to go into the portal. Of the 5 guys that have gone into the portal, I only know of one that has committed as far as, say, ACC school, and that was Georgia Tech. For the most part, as far as the guys that transfer from the University of Alabama, they will not do what Henry did and transfer it within the conference. They would transfer outside the conference. The last guy, I think, Brandon Tunnage. As far as the schools he had in his 6 was one of the schools I know off the top was UCF, and the reason why was because, okay, a Mississippi kid, Malzahn had recruited him hard. He has a relationship with one of the assistants as well as Malzahn, so it's a possibility of him going there. But as far as Alabama kids, now the other kid that transferred to the ACC school was, God dog it, was a linebacker out of Georgia, but he transferred to Georgia Tech because, hey, he was a Georgia kid. But for the most part, you find that for whatever reason, it's an unwritten rule, if that makes any sense, as far as for what Henry did, as far as transferring in the conference. I would be hard pressed to say, Mark, as far as kids doing that within the SEC in the next year, 2 or 3 for that matter, even if it is stated from sea to shining sea that you can do it. I don't see any kids. I only see that 1% that's willing to do it.
Okay, let's run them down here. We've got the Alabama transfer portal list from 2021, both the players coming and the players going. Jameson Williams leaves a blue blood to go to a blue blood, Ohio State, Alabama. So that doesn't prove our point one way or the other. He's leaving a giant for a giant. Okay, Ishmael Sopsher left Alabama to go to USC. Okay, pretty much the same thing, even though USC is not playing like a giant, same tier. Henry To'oTo'o left Tennessee to go to Alabama. Okay, well, Tennessee's a great all-time program, but they've been marginal at best over the last 12 or 13 years. So he is moving up in class. You mentioned Kevin Harris, the outside linebacker, leaving Alabama to go to Georgia Tech. So I would think that in that situation, that's exactly what I'm playing up, is that a player goes to an elite program and they think that they are at that status, but they get buried on the depth chart. They don't play up to expectations. And then he can go to a Georgia Tech. And I would think that he would be a pretty prominent player there. Same thing with, is it Ale Cahoe, the inside linebacker who left Alabama, and he's going to UCLA. So there's another, still a big time school, but they're nowhere close to the same level of play as Alabama. And maybe he can go there after he's just buried on the depth chart and suddenly be an impact player at UCLA. Texas, huge program, big name, on the same level in certain respects as Alabama, but certainly not on the field in recent days. Well, Ben Davis is a 5-star. Now, he was banged up and injured, and that was part of his issue, but he just flat out didn't live up to expectations. He goes to Texas. Maybe he gets more of an opportunity there. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Eddie Smith leaves Alabama, goes to Illinois. We'll find out about your guy, Brandon Turnage, who announced his list. He has yet to decide. Ronald Williams. Here's another example of what I'm talking about here as a cornerback leaving Alabama, now going to Michigan State, where instead of competing against high 4 and 5 stars, going to be competing against mostly 3 stars and a few 4 stars at Michigan State. So this list, and doesn't prove my point, but it kind of leans toward my point that I would think that the transfer portal would be a situation in which a high caliber player who was rated very highly at high school, but gets, what the depth chart looks like at wide receiver at Ohio State right now, or at Alabama the last few years at wide receiver, just for one example, where there are 5 stars that are like 6 deep on the roster, where after a couple of years, they're thinking, hey, I could go to another big time program, but not at this level. And they would welcome me with open arms, and I should be able to catch 60 or 70 passes there. This is what this list looks like right here. Illinois, Michigan State, Texas, UCLA, Georgia Tech.
Indeed. And along those lines, Mark, I would have never thought that I would have seen the day in which the conference would have been lockstep in allowing this to happen, as in enter conference. And that being the case, Mark, I'm more of the mindset now is that for the first time, Nick Saban is pushing all his chips into the table, as far as the middle of the table, and I think he's making one push for these next 4 years. And if you look at the 20 and the 21 class, that is pretty much because I think in the classes of 22 and 23, I think the max that they're going to be able to sign, I don't see them being able to sign over 20. Because when I tried to do my little consumer math as far as the 85, 90 numbers are concerned, as far as the roster, I think they may be one over now. And that's also, waiting as far as whether JTT, heads to Ohio or whether he's going to head to Tuscaloosa. So that's what my little question is as far as numbers wise, and really across the board. How are the numbers as far as Ohio State? How are the numbers as far as Clemson? How are the numbers as far as Alabama, Oklahoma, et cetera? But I know specifically as far as Alabama, I know that they were at least 5 over, and just by a snap of the finger, I don't think that they're more than maybe 1 over right now. And I just wonder as far as whether that year mulligan, as far as this past season, Mark, whether that hurt you or is it of no consequence as far as that COVID year that everyone had?
Well, it's not going to hurt anybody this year, because when you think about it, there's just going to be an abundance of players. So there's not going to be a roster shortage anywhere, because for 1 year, they don't have to deal with the numbers game because they have all these extra years of eligibility. So they're able to pad their roster. Now, I don't know what the limitations are on that. If they're able to carry the same number of scholarships plus the additional scholarships. So you got the 85 scholarships. So for example, everybody's got 85 full scholarships, but let's say because of this COVID year that there's a team that has 9 players that want to take advantage of that extra year. And there's another team that's got 12, and another team has 19, and another team has 6. If they are just allowing those scholarships just to extend for another year and say they don't count against the scholarship limit, that has to be the case, because there's no way that they can count against the scholarship limit, or there would be players dropping off rosters all over the place. So from a depth standpoint, this helps coaches tremendously for 1 year. Now they're going to have to be thinking ahead, and I'm sure that they are. They and their staffs are crunching the numbers to prepare for 2022. and what they need to do. But for this 1 year, they kind of got a mulligan in regards to depth.
Now, would it be safe as far as your Buckeyes are concerned, your depth would be more so receiver, running back, and linebacker?
Definitely the first two. I'm going to stop with the first two. I don't see, they might have the numbers at linebacker. I don't even think that the numbers are that. They're okay when it comes to numbers, but not in regards to quality. They don't have proven play at linebacker.
Because I was just thinking more so as in the plethora of 5 stars. So I guess for a moment, Mark, I was just getting lost in the stars as far as Ohio State and the linebacker. So
defensive line, running back.
Okay.
Now, if you're talking about the quality and the quantity, number 1, wide receiver, number 2, running back, number 3, defensive line. And I would actually argue the defensive line would be in second place behind the running back or behind the wide receivers at Ohio State in terms of quality and quantity. And we understand Tyreek Johnson, defensive end at Ohio State, has entered the transfer portal just in the last few minutes.
And that being the case, but would you say that as far as if you had to compare the just the unofficial top 4 schools, that Ohio State has done the best as far as keeping their kids?
Yeah, they haven't had many players leave at all. This Jamison Williams, who went to go play for your Crimson Tide, he wasn't a huge loss. Now, he is a big talent. He had a great high school career, and he's played fairly well in the spots that he's gotten some playing time at Ohio State. He caught three passes and 62 yards and a touchdown against Clemson, including one in which he just burned the corner, ran a post for a touchdown in that playoff game. So he's played relatively well when he's been given the time. But he's like the most productive player that's left Ohio State, unless somebody can chime in with anybody else. And I'm almost certain I can't think of anybody else who's been productive at Ohio State that is left.
That's what I was thinking also.
Nobody. I can't think of anybody. Like Boston College is going to start a guy in Jalen Gill this season who was lost at Ohio State. He was a 5-star and signed at Ohio State, and great things were expected of him, and he never got playing time, and he transferred to Boston College, and he's going to be one of their top 2 wide receivers and led them in receiving last year.
Okay. And I think when it's all said and done in reference to the young man that transferred from Ohio State to the University of Alabama, it's going to serve a twofold purpose. One is giving some experience, some extra experience, if that makes any sense, as far as the receiving core. But then also 2 of the top receivers, one in particular as far as the number 1 wide receiver in the class of 22, is a St. Louis kid, as far as Luther Bird. Now, although we know he's committed as far as to University of Oklahoma, but as far as still, he's gonna do the visits, and by that being the case, and also I think it's a Kevin Coleman that's also a St. Louis kid, and I know that he has a relationship with Burden, so I think that may be as far as the proverbial 2 birds with 1 stone as far as that's concerned. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, but as far as I'm just wondering as far as how some institutions are able to stack the numbers, Mark. That goes without saying over my pay grade. But that being the case, I don't see it specifically as far as University of Alabama. Probably the next 2 years, I'm looking at no more than 20 kids being able to be signed because of the numbers, and then those other 5 kids maybe wind up being transfer portal, and he's pushing all his chips in the middle of the table, Mark, to go on and win. 3 out of the next 4, whatever. And then go into his mansion on the lake and use his Irish Spring in the lake. So, but as always, Mark, a privilege to speak with you, man. You take care, and it's good to see you not in a Dallas-Fort Worth airport, man.
It's good to have a shower and not be in a Dallas-Fort Worth airport where I have to sleep, against a hard seat. Yeah, absolutely. And when I let you go here, Kevin, I'm actually going to answer your question because I never did about the transfer portal and whether I see it as a positive or negative for college football. All right, sir.
Look forward to it.
Appreciate the call.
Hey, thanks, Mark. You take care. Have a good evening now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
So for me, when it comes to the transfer portal, it comes down to this. The positive is the freedom that it gives to student athletes, because I'm a red-blooded, true blue patriot American who believes in freedom of speech and freedom of choice with very small, minor, reasonable limitations. And so I believe that we should all be able to work, play, and educate ourselves where we choose to go. So I believe in the power of choice and the freedom of choice in this country. So I do not want to restrict that. However, one unique aspect of college football that I've always enjoyed, that I've always considered to be unique to college football, among some other aspects of tradition and pageantry and brand and image and hoopla and the game experience, is that this is what's been robbed of the college football fan. When your player who had always played for, talk is Pitt had always been a Pitt Panther, Tony Dorsett, Aaron Donald, Larry Fitzgerald, on down the line, all those great Pitt Panther players, Darrelle Revis, they will always and forever just be Pitt Panthers. They move on to the NFL. They became great players or bust, whatever they become, they were just Pitt Panthers. And I see all sorts of schools represented in the live chat. And you know who your favorite players are. You know who those players are who aren't necessarily the star players, but they just grabbed you. They just became a favorite. And then they maybe moved on to the NFL and had a 7-year career, and it was nothing special. But as long as they were suiting up in the NFL, they could have played for 20 different teams in the NFL, but they were always, as a collegiate, your Buckeye, your Iowa Hawkeye, your USC Trojan, and they never played for anybody else. Their blood, from an athletic standpoint, from a football standpoint, was pure. They never played for the rival. They never played for anybody else, never donned the colors of another jersey of another school. They were always your player representing your school. That has been lost. That was lost a few years ago in little spurts. Now it's lost all over the place. I look up guys now and I look up their stats and I see guys that have played for 3 schools. We're getting to that point. We're working on teams that are now playing for 3 schools. So I have some other positives and negatives, but at the core, those are the positives and negatives for me in regards to the transfer portal. Freedom of choice, positive, tarnishing the loyalty of the player to the school and the college football tradition. That hurts. That hurts. Dennis hit it right on the nose here, though. Mark Rogers does not believe in the freedom to make your own out-of-conference schedule. That I do not believe in. Absolutely. And we'll get to that in just a second. I do want to review some more comments in the live chat, and I will, as it is being promoted here, of course, the NFL schedule release was today. I do not want to discuss the NFL schedule itself. I want to discuss the NFL scheduling approach and how it could be applied in certain ways to college football. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's 28AD28.
Hey, there he is. How you doing?
I'm well. Yourself?
I'm good.
Good, good. Mark, just wanted to chime in real quick on the transfer portal deal. Saban made the comment, I guess he said the rich get richer. And he said that's going to be the big sort of outcome of this. And I don't know if it's necessarily the rich get richer, because it does sort of go both ways, like where kids transfer from the big school to a smaller school, like you just mentioned a few moments ago. But it seems like it's almost like a life raft, like insurance to some degree for your power program. Like, for instance, Georgia has a problem at quarterback, so they end up with Wake Forest's quarterback, who was pretty decent, or USC's quarterback. Miami needs a couple of defensive ends. They get Temple's defensive end, who was really good there. So kids are playing well at one school, and then when the bigger school has a hole, they fill that hole for them. J.K. Dobbins graduates from Ohio State, and Trey Sermon shows up. If the Buckeyes have a problem on the offensive line, Jonah Jackson shows up. Oklahoma loses Trajan Bridges this year, wide receiver. But then we dip in the portal and we take Arkansas's wide receiver. Georgia gets a safety from West Virginia. Alabama gets the 202 kid, the linebacker, who was good. And they got Dickerson from the offensive line from Florida State. So it's like if you have a hole in your power program and you have a hole, you can sort of fill your holes. Not necessarily make yourself super better, but you'll never experience that drop off, because there's always a kid out there who's played well someplace else, a proven successful kid. These aren't kids that don't see the field. These are kids that didn't leave because they weren't seeing the field. They left, they were successful, but went to a better program. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, my thoughts are that it diminishes the integrity and the loyalty that we attach to college football. But I don't have an issue with it in regards to, in any way, just in terms of what's fair, what's fair for the student athlete. Now, I do think that there should be some level of obligation to the school and the coaching staff that signed the player. And so I do think that it needs to be regulated. We can't have players playing for 4 different schools in 4 years. I believe that they should be held accountable to a certain degree. So this is my very simplistic plan. It would need to be further vetted to determine loopholes and to determine each particular case that could apply to this situation or to this set of circumstances. But I would allow everyone a one transfer opportunity unless there was a coaching change. Any particular student athlete in football is tied to the head coach, but more so to the position coach. So I would make a condition there that they would be able to exercise their transfer option if a coach left, whether that be their position coach or the head coach, and that they could also leave with no reason given once in their career. That seems fair to me.
So you would allow 2 transfer opportunities at most?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that tends to make a little more sense. Like you said, I'm more looking at the I won't say I fear, but one of the things I look at is with name, image, and likeness coming aboard. It's a marketing opportunity for a kid. I'm going to try to win 4 national championships with 4 different schools. I'm going to play in 4 different conferences. And kids will just start jumping around and doing that if they want to. Maybe a group of them get together and say, the 4 of us are all going to travel, like they do in basketball. Everybody sort of signs up at the same school because, we all know each other from the camps and blah, blah, blah. Well, the 4 of us are going to go play for Ohio State this year. The next year we're moving to Texas. Then we're going to slide over Alabama. Then we're going to finish up at USC. To me, the whole thing, it'll start to become a joke after a while.
It could.
Because the toothpaste never goes back in the tube. It only expands itself. You know what I mean? It only gets worse.
Sure.
So I just wonder what's the stopping point? What's going to be the point where someone steps in and says, okay, that's too much? If ever, And then my other question for you, Mark, tonight, you talked about college football commissioners how the game needs a commissioner, which I agree 500%. Who would you choose if you could pick a person to put in charge of college football? Who would you choose? Give me a name.
So here's a smart guy that I don't necessarily know if I was given a long time to think about it, that he would be my final choice. But the first guy that comes to mind is I think David Shaw is an extremely intelligent guy that understands a lot in this world beyond football. You know, Greg Sankey's doing a great job with the SEC. I think a conference commissioner has proven to a certain degree that he can just expand that same authority. It's basically just extrapolated to a certain degree to become a commissioner.
Yeah, I like the Shaw choice a lot, and Sankey has done very well. I really like the Shaw choice a lot. I think he's a sharp guy.
Yeah, those are
I'd
the
love
two
to
guys
see college football
that come to mind. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Those are good choices, Mark. Solid choices. Yeah, I'd love to see college football have a commissioner. I do think we need some sort of uniformity somewhere, because right now I just feel like it's just conferences behaving badly, doing whatever they want to do out on their own, making their own decisions, independent, regardless of how it impacts the others. So it'd be nice to see the game sort of come together on some level like that.
Absolutely.
All right, Mark. That's all I have for you, man.
Well, I appreciate the call.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Hey, no problem. Anytime. We'll chat again soon.
So we do have our guy D-Rock Irish on the line. D-Rock, we would ask that you would hang on here. Either stay on the line, listen to the show, or call back in. We've got Brent Baird on the line and want to go directly to him. You can catch him on First Coast News and also College Sports Today. Brent, how you doing tonight?
Mark, I'm doing well. I enjoyed the conversation there. I will also add one Barry Alvarez, who is kind of going to be a liaison for the Big Ten. And he went and wanted the job. I think he would have done a better job as Big Ten commissioner than Kevin Warren has ever done. Frankly, I think you could probably throw Oliver Luck also maybe in there too, who has been around and understands a lot. I mean, Nick Saban, when he retires, would do a good job in a situation like that, because I think he would be fair to the sport. And I certainly understand why you mentioned Greg Sankey. Now, right now, the only reason I wouldn't have Saban and Sankey would be, I think you need to have a pro playoff expansion guy who is open to the future and what might happen. So I'll just throw those names in there. I know we're here to talk SEC, but I just thought that was a fascinating subject, frankly, to get into. But just a few guys to throw out there. But it's a fascinating discussion point. Mark, my question with that is, look, I'm with you. I think the game would be better if we did have an overall, some people call it a czar, or a overall commissioner. My question is, would the other commissioners ever allow their egos to invite one main guy in to be able to do that? Now, I will tell you a guy who would have done a fabulous job. Unfortunately, he's not with us any longer. Is Mike's Life. I tell you, Mike's Life, the former commissioner of the SEC, was one of the best commissioners I think the game has ever seen. He spoke softly and carried a big stick, frankly, because he had a lot of respect. So, but anyway, I won't belabor the point, but just wanted to add that to the conversation as a little bit of a transition.
Well, the situation in adversity we just endured over this previous college football season as a nation just in normal life. But then as it spilled into college football was, of course, the pandemic. And I thought it outlined and underlined that void that we had because we had each conference acting on its own. Now, if a commissioner is effective, then he certainly is able to pull everyone together to have that overall conversation. And in certain ways, and you know this from your own life and your own business dealings, and I know this from working in a corporation most recently, that there are, and moving from department to department, there are certain things that you can apply and say, this works. And now that I've seen the operation in this department, I understand that A, B, and C will transfer and work in this particular situation. But you know what? We need to change X, Y, and Z because we're in Oregon, Washington, and California, and this is what's going on here versus what's going on in South Carolina through Texas and the southeastern portion of the country may affect and impact some decisions that are made, but some things can be uniform and there can be one mindset, one agreement, heartbeat for the good of the sport and for the student athletes and the fans and everyone involved.
Well, let me add something to that. Regardless of what people think about Roger Goodell, one thing Goodell said from day one in this pandemic, he said, boys, we're going to be safe. We're going to go through all the protocol. We're going to go through our medical people. But let me be very clear, we're playing. And I know you've got kind of an apples and oranges thing between the two, between college and pro. But my point with that is sometimes you've got to get a guy, and I give Greg Sankey credit for doing this with the SEC at the beginning of last season, that is willing to take on his shoulders the fact that, look, we're making a decision, and our decision is we're playing. If we need to stop, if we need to hold on, if we need to reschedule, we can do that. So I think to go along what you're saying, Mark, is you can have someone kind of overall to kind of lead them. Sometimes you just gently guide them. Sometimes you end up grabbing them by the collar and pushing them over the finish line. But I think it was extremely important that Goodell, whatever people thought, set the stage early, laid down the gauntlet, and said, "We're playing, guys, regardless." And I think if you've got somebody overall to give that kind of a leadership, it's important.
One of the reasons, Brent, we're hitting on the topic that we are tonight and relating college football scheduling to the NFL schedule is, of course, because the pros are releasing its schedule today. I always thought that the hoopla surrounding the NFL schedule release was one of the more blown up and superficial celebrations in sports every year. Here we have this release of the NFL schedule, and it dominates the sports landscape and the talk for the day, or probably for the next 3 or 4 days.
No.
And I applaud the NFL because they are master marketers. But anybody who understands the NFL to some degree can pretty much guess 80% of everybody's schedule in the NFL. They play everybody in their division twice. They play a designated division in the other conference that rotates. So there you're looking at like 10 games as it is.
Yeah.
And then you play a selected game, 6 games against, based on your strength of schedule, against the other teams in your conference. So it is no big mystery as to who's going to play who in the NFL. It's just about dates and times and what network. And now we can blow up the Baker Mayfield against Patrick Mahomes game in week 1. And we can start to highlight the games and just talk about these games that are so far removed from actually being played. But the NFL makes it out to be some huge holiday. And I just think it's overblown.
Well, and I agree. I think the other side of that, Mark, is it keeps them in the news, and I think that's something that college football could look at. I know the Big Ten did this, and the SEC certainly did it. they made a big deal out of when the schedule came out. I've just always thought that during the off season, college football, and see, maybe this goes back to your idea of having an overall commissioner or a czar, is how do you keep the sport in the news during the off season? And I think that's important because now, obviously, the transfer portal is keeping you in the news, and something I'm very excited about, the college preseason magazines will start coming out next week. So that's going to be great. But I just wish, as a real proponent, Mark, of college football, whatever conference it was, that college football would do more during the off season to keep themselves in the news instead of the individual stuff of someone getting arrested or someone going to the transfer portal or a coach leaving or something like that. So I think if the point you made a minute ago, the NFL and the marketing scheme, probably no one does it better than they do, does it, Mark? So I think the collegiate level could learn something about that and use that on some different subjects.
So I proposed this years ago, Brent. So right around this time when the NFL schedule is released, I go back to my platform, my soapbox, and I'm proposing the same thing in college football, that there is a college football release. Mm-hmm. But to be able to do that, we have to stop this crazy business of allowing every program to run around and schedule its own games. Right. It would all, again, have to be brought under one authority head to systematically approach scheduling. And then each year, even though that there would be a system to the schedule, we would have a schedule release. Let's say every May 1st, college football fans could get all fired up and wait and anticipate that schedule release on May 1st. And we would get that schedule release on May 1st and not have to hear these random news releases every few weeks that, oh, Georgia's going to play Notre Dame in 2033. Yeah. Oh, fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that. But even if it was March 1st or April 1st or something of that nature, I would agree with that. And see, I think what's going to make that even more important in the next few years is if we have a situation that we're going toward now of the haves and the have-nots, and we end up in some kind of a top 64 type situation, Mark, and they end up playing each other, or maybe the non-power 5 end up going to the spring. And I still think that idea may be more successful than people realize it would be. I think at that point, if you're dealing with, and we get to that point of a 64 that are kind of doing their own thing, I mean, how long would it take to put it in the computer and come up with a representative schedule that will be probably pretty balanced? Not everybody would like it, but that the fans would enjoy. And I mean, ADs are now trying to find new ways to sell tickets. You have the schedule better. It's like the SEC last year playing that 10-game schedule, how successful that was. I mean, we may never see that again, unfortunately, but you knew every week, Mark, it was going to be a good football game.
Brent, I built a in-conference and out-of-conference schedule in college football a couple of years ago by hand and gave everybody a 500 conference, in-conference, and out-of-conference schedule, because that's right. What I'm trying to achieve is schedule equitability, equity, I should say, where the NFL is trying to create parity, because every time I release this schedule idea and I lay it all out, which is typically more structured than just having this conversation, I'll lay out all the points, I get accused of trying to make college football the NFL. No, the NFL is trying to create parity. Therefore, if you achieve success last year, they're trying to knock you down and give you a more difficult schedule, just like a more difficult drafting position, versus they're trying to lift up the bad teams and give them easier schedules and a better drafting position. I'm just all about equity. Give everyone, and we can't see into the future, so it's impossible to achieve scheduling equity on the field, but at least in theory, you can build a schedule that's equitable for everyone. And that's what I would like to see.
Right. Well, Mark, and aren't the fans who are saying that they want to expand the playoffs in order to get more teams involved than as Phil still has it in his early top 10, Bama, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Ohio State. I think, frankly, don't fans want that, Mark? They want a little bit more, and that they're tired of these teams. Now, these teams aren't going away. Even if you expanded the playoff to 8, 12, or 16, I still think at the end those teams are still going to be there. But I think, to your point, Mark, I think that's what some of these fans are saying, in that they want different teams in the playoffs. Is they want more equality than what they're doing, and more equity than what they've got at this point. So I think, in essence, what a lot of these fans are saying, and that their problems with the 14 playoff falls in line with something that you've looked at and looking at the future.
Yeah, even if we're going to still arrive at Ohio State and Alabama in a national championship game, I am not going to be, certainly not wanting to see North Carolina and Iowa State play a college football playoff game, or Auburn and Oregon play a college football playoff game.
Sure.
I think we would have remarkable matchups. Got Brent Barrett on the line for First Coast News and College Sports Today to talk up the SEC. Everyone has concluded their spring practice. And is there anything in particular that hits you, especially considering where you thought all these teams stood 4 to 6 weeks ago?
I think the upper echelon is who we thought it would be. In Alabama and Georgia, A&M and LSU, and Florida, I think, is in there too. I think what kind of strikes me right now is how little we actually know about Tennessee and South Carolina. Vanderbilt's probably in that mix too, and some of these, and some of the other teams that, particularly with new coaches, and what to kind of expect or not to expect with that. So that's one of the interesting things, Mark, that I'm looking at this point, would be where some of these teams really are. I mean, even Florida here near us, in Jacksonville, about an hour and a half away, they're still, let's just say they did not have a spring game. There's a real air of a mystery about what to expect with them, because we just don't know who the quarterback's going to be. And we've got several schools of that nature too. So, and by the way, I mentioned Tennessee. I like that Bowling Green game moved to Thursday night. I've always thought the SEC should play more Thursday night games. They would scoff at that in some places, but it gives you a chance to see what Josh Heupel and this group has got in the first game. See, that's a game on Thursday night we'll all be watching. If you play that game on Saturday with the rest of the SEC, doesn't that get swallowed up, Mark? And no one really pays much attention to it. So for Labor Day weekend, I would play multiple games on Thursday night, and I would play multiple games in the SEC on Sunday night before Labor Day, because you got the next day off.
So I love the Thursday idea, because I'm thinking back to a South Carolina Vanderbilt game on a Thursday night to open the season a few years ago. And actually the SEC network opened on a Thursday night with Texas A&M taking on South Carolina.
Sure,
and especially in that South Carolina Vandy game that was played in Nashville, if that game's played on a Saturday, nobody cares. Nobody's paying attention, but it's by itself, not by itself. It's played with a cluster of other games. But since it's an SEC game and people are just so starved to watch football, especially in that opening weekend, it was given the attention and the talk of a big game. And it would be a way to highlight, I think, that mid-tier. When you talk about Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Kentucky and those programs that have a very limited shot at winning a championship in this conference, but are really good programs, really fun teams to watch. You could really highlight, to watch Ole Miss and Kentucky play on a Thursday night. That'd be exceptional.
Absolutely. It would be. Oh, yeah. But Mark, here's the other thing with this, and this is probably the approach we need to take, is you play on a Thursday night once a year, guys, and you're going to have it all by yourself, and it would help recruiting. So, that's the magic word with a lot of these coaches. They got a prospect or two out of that. They play every Thursday night for that matter. But agree to totally. And look, Mark, the SEC is the king of the hill, and everybody knows that. And I think they will be for the foreseeable future. But look, you and I have been in this business too long. Nothing lasts forever, does it, brother? And you may be the best conference right now, but you've got to prepare yourself long term and be a visionary to know that if you still do all you can to market yourself by doing something unique, and that would be unique, at that point, you're only going to help yourself for the future.
Absolutely. Got a tremendous trivia question that caught my eye coming in from Cole Converse. Now, he did release the answer, but in trying to listen to you, Brent, and discuss at the same time, I was ineffective in trying to come up with an answer, but it seemed rather obvious once I saw it here in the live chat. So Cole asked if the playoffs in 2021 were Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and Iowa State, name the only quarterback to ever play all four of those schools in his collegiate career. And so he's talking about a current quarterback of sorts now in the NFL, and the answer was Ian Book of Notre Dame. So I saw that, and I gave a few schools a scan. Like I thought, okay, Oklahoma played Alabama in the playoff a couple of years ago, and they've played Georgia and Iowa State in the same continent now, and I couldn't quite match it up. But yeah, Ian Book with that one. All right, we got Brent Barrett on the line from First Coast News, and also catch him on College Sports Today. And Brent, as you're well aware, Jimbo Fisher made a comment this week directed at the Alabama football program that was much ballyhooed. Asked last week at the Houston Touchdown Club gathering about the key to beating Nick Saban and Alabama. Fisher predicted the Aggies would thump Saban and company. He responded, I want to get the exact quote here. I'm not finding it. I've read it a few times, but basically that we're going to get the job done. We're going to beat Alabama. We're going to take them down. I've got all the respect in the world for Nick Saban and what they've accomplished. They're the standard, but we are going to get the job done. Yeah.
And look, people have raised all kinds of, and again, this is kind of the silly season. There's not a whole lot going on. So if he makes this remark in September in the Houston Touchdown Club, nobody pays attention to it, although Alabama would have it as bulletin board material. And I mean, my question this is, what's he going to say? Okay, yeah, we've averaged losing them 21 points in the last several years. Well, we think we're going to do that again. So, but he's trying to sell tickets and fire up his alumni. So he's going to say something like that. And look, you and I talked about this A&M team, Mark. I think we've seen this coming over the last few years. Now they've got to replace 3 guys on the offensive line, but their defensive line is going to be one of the better defensive lines in the league. And obviously they've got to find a quarterback. Is that going to be the King kid? Well, we don't know. That's a possibility. Widemeyer is a tight end. They're always going to have a great tight end. So I don't have any doubt about that. I thought the biggest thing that happened to them in the offseason was Mike Elko staying. The defense coordinator who makes, what is it, Mark, two a year or 2.5? Woo! That's incredible coordinator money for what you and I were used to years ago. But they are, and they've got all their big games in College Station. So that also helps them a lot. I'll tell you this, and I don't think I'd hesitate to say this. If Kellen Mond was coming back, I'm not so sure there wouldn't be some people to pick A&M to win the national championship because they've kind of got everything there. I mean, Jimbo is going to come up with wide receivers. I think if Osborne would have come back, that would have made a big difference. And they'll find guys. But look, they're running backs, and especially Isaiah Spiller. Mark, could you make the argument he's the best running back besides Tank Bigsby in the league? At this point, I know Brian Robinson's good, but I don't think he's had the carries to give us that yet. So, and I'll throw out a little bit of an upset here. I was asked last week to pick some upset games. A&M goes to Colorado, and I don't think anybody mentioned that, Mark. And I'm not going to say Colorado's going to win, but if you look at what they did last year, that could be a little bit of a spooky game if A&M's looking ahead to the SEC, could it not?
It could be, especially considering that early in the season last year, even with a veteran quarterback against a pretty stout Vandy defense on a given night, Texas A&M had an issue getting by the Commodores at home early in the season. I forget the final score. It was ugly, 12-7 or something in that range against Vanderbilt. So, who knows? I believe that game's going to be played in the NFL stadium there in Denver.
Well, Jimbo's done a really good job, and look, those first 2 years, we're just to get the roster where it is now. And A&M beat writers, that's kind of what they've told us, is the clock on Jimbo is really just now started last year, frankly. So in that from here on in, that's what they've got to look at. But people may not like Jimbo. May not want to go to lunch with him, but I can tell you this: he can coach, and I think we're certainly going to find that out. And I'm really curious, Mark, if they were in the Eastern Division, where they would be every year. Boy, how good would that be at that point? So, and again, don't sleep on LSU. I know LSU's got all these problems swirling around with the Title IX situation and so forth, but I mean, whoever the quarterback's going to be, I think whether it's Max Johnson or Miles Brennan, good and well, maybe the Emory kid, they're going to have a really good running back room. Their line of scrimmage, like A&M, is very good. I mean, virtually everybody came back. We know Stingley in the secondary is one of the best, if not the best, in the nation. People don't need to sleep on LSU. And Mark, hit me with this. I think they sort with what UCLA
yes, and at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. I'm not saying UCLA is going to win that game, but look, if they made some improvement and they started making a little bit of improvement, UCLA did at the end of last year, that could be an intriguing game. I don't think anybody's even talked about it.
Yeah, I'm going to have fun watching that game. I love the spectacle of the location. The Rose Bowl is one of the great games to see on television.
It is.
Of course. And UCLA, don't look at their record from last year as a marked improvement. I believe they went 3-4, but they got off to a rough start. They rallied. They played well. They beat some decent teams. They took USC to the wire, a game that they should have won. They led by a couple scores in the fourth quarter against probably one of the top 15 teams in the nation. So Chip Kelly may finally be getting things turned around in Westwood. Brent, you mentioned, and of course, Texas A&M, you talk about the Aggies. Kevin Sumlin and company traveled out to the Rose Bowl for an opening weekend affair and took their lumps in the final 10 minutes of one of the historic comebacks in college football history, leading, I think, 44-10,
something like that. Yes.
and losing 45-44 or something in that range. Yeah.
That that was a very difficult loss, and basically kind of started things on a downward spiral at that point too. So, and look, I still say Kentucky is a better team than people give them credit for. Frankly, now Joey Gatewood, I understand, had a pretty good spring, kid from Jacksonville. We'll see how that holds up. But Mark, people may not realize this. Kentucky had David. He sure can recruit with the best of them. Kentucky had 6 guys taken in the draft. I mean, Mark, that says something for what Mark Stoops has done at that school. Listen, I still say if Kentucky wins early, that Auburn game was an officiating fiasco. And frankly, Kentucky had that game won. You remember that Ole Miss Kentucky game?
Sure.
That had as much controversy in that one too. Listen, if they win those games, and they had a slew of injuries, I really wonder, because we all thought at the beginning of the year that Kentucky would be a top 3 team in that division, along with Florida and Georgia. So that's a so I like Stoops, and frankly, with what he's done, he reminds me a little bit of what Rich Brooks did there in that great bowl run that they had. Mark, if he stays there another 2 or 3, 4, 5 years, I think they need to put a statue of him outside of the stadium.
Well, Brent, I was raising my hand when you were talking about what could have been for Kentucky last year, because I certainly took a beating and still do. Every couple of days, somebody will remind me that I went out on a limb and picked Kentucky to win the SEC Eastern Division. And yes, I did. And
but listen, in fairness, I'll say this, and you remember this like I do. Going into last year, we knew they were probably a quarterback away from being a really solid club, and we weren't quite sure who that was going to be. At that point, obviously, Terry Wilson gets hurt, and you kind of go from there. But, look, I know that was going out on a limb. I get it, but I'll be the first to say I was as impressed with that Kentucky team going into the season as just about anybody in the league.
Hey, Brent, I'm going to make a parallel to another Eastern Division team that sounds a lot like the way you just described Kentucky. When I was watching the NFL draft, I was seeing in the middle rounds players coming off the board off that Missouri defense and the offensive line, Larry Roundtree, and of course, Nick Bolton, the star of the defense.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people, despite those NFL losses, like Missouri to stir things up in the Eastern Division.
I love Drinkwith and what he's done. I think he's as imaginative as he can be. So, no, I listen, I don't dispute that at all. And I still thought it was last year that, and look, I get the record with Stoops, by the way, but again, he started, if you look at the end of it and then the beginning of it, it's 2 different records, frankly, at that point. But I would still say Roundtree was a guy that never got the credit he deserved. And frankly, was one of the more, could you argue, Mark, he was one of the more dependable backs in the league?
Absolutely. Over the entirety of his career.
Yeah.
He has been. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Mizzou, an interesting club that is almost always down in those final 2 or 3 spots of recruiting rankings, but able to develop talent, now working on a third coach here in the last 6 to 7 years. I remember being somewhat surprised that this looked like a program that was overmatched when it entered the league. I believe their opening SEC game was a game against Georgia at home, in which they were just beaten up and run up and down the field. And they had a rough first year in that 2012 year, the first year that, of course, A&M and Johnny Manziel joined as well, and had much more success. But by 2013 and 14, good old Gary Pinkel was getting his team to Atlanta.
Yeah. Look, Pinkel never got the credit he deserved at Missouri. And look, I'll go one step further, Mark. And I know the game got out of hand early. Do you remember the Alabama game last year in early September? Bama had that game in hand. Missouri made a really valiant effort in the fourth quarter, came back and made that game certainly closer, and really kind of showed some moxie of what they're capable of doing. So, and we didn't quite know how good Alabama was going to be with Mac Jones at that point. But I remember distinctly how hard they fought and how well they played. Missouri did in the fourth quarter of that Bama game.
So we are going to update Lewis's statistic there, Brent. Mark Stoops is 23-14 the last three seasons with three consecutive bowl victories over three pretty good football teams.
Well, and look, I'll make this. I'll also say this. What would they do during that time if they had a really steady quarterback? When you look at them, and it was Bowden, right? They put the wide receiver Bowden at quarterback, and I mean they knew he was going to run the ball. So, and even that, they couldn't stop him. I remember the bowl game when he was just Superman, frankly. So my thing with that is how look, we're not saying Kentucky's going to win the division necessarily, win the SEC, but what we're saying is this is all proof of what Stoops has done. And I'll still say, Mark, that if they had a really dependable quarterback, say that they had one guy instead of 6 over the last 3 years, how much better that club would have been.
Brent, I typically don't bring up these type of questions and conversations because I think they're overblown in media hype leading into seasons. But I am going to pose this question in this way. Do you believe that Kirby Smart and Georgia have the most pressure on them entering this 2021 season?
Well, they're certainly one of the teams that do. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, they've got to look. I mean, in fairness, they won the SEC, beating Auburn in the SEC championship game. They got to the championship game with Alabama. Tua hits Devonta Smith, and Bama wins the game. But still, Georgia fans would tell you right now, and we're in the middle of them because in Jacksonville has the second largest Bulldog club in America, next to the one in Atlanta. So we hear that all the time. That can Kirby get over the hump, and the hump's going to be is obviously continue to win the East. Can they beat Alabama in the SEC championship game and be able to make consistent improvement? JT Daniels with them, Zamir White. I mean, they've got a really good running back room. James Cook, Kendall Milton, Kenny McIntosh, Dejon Edwards. The defense is going to be very good. To the West Virginia transfer coming over really helped the secondary, to say the least. They've got a really good kicker who, frankly, is from our area in South Georgia that nailed the 50-plus yard field goal to beat Cincinnati in the bowl game, and the thing may have gone 60 at that point. So I'm concerned, Mark, about the wide receivers being banged up. And how that could hurt Georgia. Kirby Smart said at the end of the spring game that the offensive line had the furthest to go of any unit on the field. I would also say the secondary does too. But I think that's a great point. And let me throw this out at you too. If they lose to Clemson and start 0-1. How much pressure is that going to put on them at that point, knowing that if they lose another game, that they could be out of it early? But now my counter to that is, if you and this is the only thing that matters, the playoff committee would give Georgia a lot of credit for playing that game to begin with, and frankly, even a loss to Clemson would not by any stretch of imagination, take them out of the national championship picture. You win the SEC, you're in the playoffs, right, basically. But Georgia fans, I know Georgia fans, they lose that Clemson game, and there will be a lot of pressure on them. And listen, I'm not saying they're going to lose this game, but they play UAB early, and UAB does not have the roster that Georgia does. But I can tell you this, that UAB coaching staff is really good. So I could see UAB, particularly after an emotional couple weeks after that Clemson game, that could be somewhat of a challenge. So to your question, and Kirby would say right now, well, we take the pressure, we're okay with it, we can live with it. But and I know that there's a tremendous amount on him right now in that coaching staff.
UAB went to Coral Gables last year, and they had a one-score game with Miami into the fourth quarter before losing by multiple scores. So they played well against a top 15 opponent last year. To your point, James Scott is making the comment in the live chat, and I completely agree that the point spread in the Clemson-Georgia game is going to be huge, especially on Georgia's side. So I think the conventional thought is that it's certainly a more meaningful game for Georgia because of the conference schedule versus what Clemson has to face. Clemson could lose to Georgia. They could lose to Georgia by 2 scores and then go win the ACC and win every game and win the conference and go to the playoffs.
Easily.
Be 13-1. Georgia, though, if they lose that game, again, to James' point, I believe, and I've stated this a number of times, that the committee is going to give the loser of that game a ton of credit if let's say it's a classic. It is just a great game. It almost, even though it's a loss in the loss column, it almost proves that as long as the winner of the game goes on to do what we expect them to do, that for the loser, it almost substantiates how good they are. Even though it's a loss, you lost 38-35 in a great, great game to one of the top 3 teams in the country. Okay, what are you going to fall 2-4?
Right.
Or maybe even hold your ground because you basically proved that you're as good as they are. You just happen to lose the game. But to your point, Georgia's then going to have to face an SEC regular season and then an SEC championship game. And we know who we all expect to be sitting there in Atlanta.
Well, and see, here's the other thing I think too with Georgia is, I mean, they're going to be up for Auburn. They're going to be up for Florida. But see, the problem in this league, and look, Mark, we covered the ACC just about as close as we do the SEC. But we just have to be honest about this. If Clemson loses that game, their chance of being tripped up is so minimal compared to what it's going to be for Georgia. And look, I remember the NC State game a few years ago, Mark, that NC State misses a field goal and they should have beat Clemson. Well, what are you going to have that once every 5 years or something like that? In the SEC, you can have that every year. So it's like you remember a couple years ago when South Carolina beats Georgia in that incredible upset. So I mean, that's what I'm looking at is if Georgia loses Clemson. I mean, even if you split, say, Auburn and Florida, there's always a chance in this league on the road on a rainy, messy, weird kind of night of anything happening in the SEC.
hopefully everyone's still with us. My apologies there. And hopefully Brent will be able to jump back on. I believe that was my internet issue. Brent, my apologies. That was my internet issue, and I was trying to get it back as soon as possible.
Yeah,
But me, and I had this strange thing where it defaulted to the wrong internet setting, and to try to get it back fixed took a few minutes. So basically, we were back on the path of Georgia's path to a college football playoff appearance.
Yes. Well, I mean, look, they'll have the talent to do it. I don't have any doubt that Georgia's got their typical tremendous talent. I mean, at this point, you've got look, the best rosters in the nation. This is how I go by college football. It's the top 50 players, and Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia, or I think, or in that group, that you could say that those schools have made the ultimate compromise and the ultimate decision is to go all out for college football, and it shows. They've got the facilities, they've got the players, they've got the resources, and all that goes along with it. But again, when you're in this league, a lot of interesting things happen, and it takes time. It's going to take Tennessee a lot of time. It's going to take South Carolina a lot of time. It's going to take LSU less time. But if this, they're going to be really good on the field. But if this Title IX falls down on the program, we just don't know who the scapegoat may be in there. Could that be O, or is he pretty safe? I mean, I don't know if we know that, Mark, definitively, frankly. So, and Brian Harsin and Auburn, where could they be at this point? That's going to be very interesting. And one of the better games in the SEC is going to be, this is a sneaky good game. Auburn goes to Penn State in September. I don't hear anyone talking about that game, but I'll say this: if Auburn was to win that game, that would be a humongous victory for Brian Harsin and that staff. I mean, is Penn State going to win the Big Ten? No, I don't think they are, but still, they're a solid club, and that would be a tremendous win for Harsin, frankly.
Absolutely, and could go a long ways toward that narrative of measuring not just teams, by extension conferences in determining the college football playoff selections.
I see the question there, Mark, and I'll be glad to look at that. Steve Sarkisian, when he was in Alabama, was one of the more innovative play callers. Look, for what he did, and not even with Devonta Smith, what he did with Najee Harris in that national championship game, by using him in so many different ways. Listen, Sark can do a lot of great things. I think, can he turn them around eventually? Maybe, but look, here's the thing, and Mark, I'm not being disparaging against Texas. I'm just basically laying out the way it is. The problem with Texas is can you make the boosters happy? Can you keep them at arm's length, yet involve them to a certain degree, and be able to run your program? See, Saban has done that in Alabama. Before he got there, Alabama had a similar situation that Texas had. Not as many, but similar in that. And Saban basically told them, I said, look, we appreciate what you do for the program, but I'm running the program. I'm making the decisions. And if I need your input, I'll be in touch with you. And Mark, I think my question more than on the field, and I think he'll be able to recruit Texas, and I think he'll be fine, is can he deal with the pressure that comes with that program and the hundreds of people that basically want to run it? So it's an incredible program. They've got the most resources probably of anybody in the country. you look at their facilities, you ever wonder how in the world do they lose a game? So, Mark, I think navigating the waters of off the field and dealing with the boosters, to me, will determine how long you're there at Texas.
Yeah, every time there's a huge job opening in college football, we talk about money, we talk about resources, we talk about facilities and recruiting footprint and the pressure at the job and the competition in the league. Texas is the one job that includes all of that. And then there's this heavy millstone of boosters and politics and that is not mentioned with and attached to any other job in the country like it is with Texas.
Oh yeah, look, you've got the upper echelon of the Texas government that tries to get involved in and offer input and make decisions and things of that nature. And you've got people with untold amount of resources that will not be told no. So my thing for Texas has always been, it's not just the X's and O's in recruiting players. It's navigating all the off the field stuff that you've got to deal with. I mean, can Texas be back where we think they could be at some point? Yeah. And hopefully Sark has learned enough from Nick Saban to be able to get a jump start on that situation.
We get to Brent Beard on the line from First Coast News and College Sports Today. I don't want to take up too much of your time, Brent. Maybe I'll hit you with one other courtesy web security, very broad and general question, but this is what the talk is all off season. I, on our channel, grind it down to all sorts of X's and O's and personal matchups. But when it comes down to it, people love to hear about projections and predictions. If you look at this Florida schedule, it's very manageable from a non-conference standpoint because they usually load up on some pretty difficult non-conference games in addition to the Florida State game that they always have to play. That used to always be a top 10 to 15 kind of team that they had to face every year, but not so much this year. So the non-conference is light, but those two non-division games add a lot of weight with LSU, of course, every year, Alabama in week 3. Just your thoughts about Emory Jones, this Florida offense, the defense. It looks very much like a good, solid team that's going to produce all sorts of NFL players, but not necessarily elite level talent across the board that should be able to challenge Georgia, at least in my estimation.
The early projections that you're seeing would be Florida around, I've seen as low as 17, frankly, from some of the way too early projections that we've seen. I'll be interested to see when Lindy's and Athlon come out where they've got them, but pretty much everybody's projecting Georgia to win. Gosh, Mark, I saw someone predict the other day the Gators being 4th in that division. I can't imagine that they've got way too much talent for that to happen. But again, is it going to be Anthony Richardson, Emory Jones? We think is going to be the quarterback. How accurate is he going to be? We think the offensive line will be a pretty solid offensive line. I think the strength of the offense is going to be the running backs. I mean, they've got guys like Lorenzo Lingard, who came over from Miami, who really hadn't even hit his stride yet. And they've got a really deep room. And I think the receivers are going to be pretty much okay. Also, the shorter kid from Penn State, among some of those, Copeland and some of that group going to be pretty good. Look, how you replace Kyle Pitts, you just don't. He was such a unicorn in a lot of ways. Now, I think the defense will be good. Now, I know people, and the more you can believe they are here, they're not happy that Todd Grantham is back at DC, but at the same time, Grantham, I think, has got a good club. I mean, what they've done in the transfer portal is probably to fix that defensive line as much as they have anything else. I think that's important. They had to make some real changes in the secondary, so they brought in some different coaches there. Marco Wilson, the kid who threw the shoe, I mean, obviously he's gone. But Mark, there's something else here that needs to be addressed with them. They've got the talent. And the thing I've always said about Dan Mullen is we know what the basement is. The basement is at the very worst, 8-4, 9-3, something like that. But what we don't know is how high is the ceiling, and can he get in to a national championship game? And again, to their credit, last year, Mark, I'm convinced if they beat LSU and they were to, and they would have beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. I mean, they would have been they'd have been in the college football playoffs. So humongous game at the Swamp, middle of September when Bama comes in. We'll know what they've got at that point. The Georgia game here is always a difficult game. And I'm telling you that I think they've got better players, but that Florida State game is not going to be as easy as it has been, particularly if Mackenzie Milton ends up being the quarterback there. Jordan Travis is among that bunch. And I think they will be better. So that's a really good question around here is what are they going to be doing? And see, the other thing, I know you've touched on this with Dan Mullen himself. You know, some people thought that Darth Vader outfit on Halloween was cute. Some others thought that it was insane. I think they were very concerned about the Missouri game at halftime, where he kind of gets runs to the officials and they almost have a melee in midfield. And Mullen comes out and gets the fans fired up. And even Mullen himself admitted that he needs to watch his behavior. But look, here's the number one thing for Florida. And I know you've talked about this, but it bears repeating. Mark, they've done well with the transfer portal. Where they need to do better is National Signing Day, because this is a staff that, frankly, has not recruited the way they need to recruit. That they're okay, but Mark, you know, if you're 7 and 8 in the national recruiting rankings in the SEC, you've got what, 5 teams above you or something like that. So I think what's going to be important for them is that they've really got to take a look at their recruiting and where they go with that. And I mean, Florida fans will tell you that they believe this is a staff that struggles in recruiting. And to me, the bottom line is for them to go to the next level, that's an area of the program that's got to really improve.
So we're looking at the last 2 classes at number 12 and number 9 in the nation in 20 and 21 and number 9 in the nation in 19. So that's what's currently on the roster.
Yes.
The bulk of the roster are, you know, those are fine recruiting classes. You know, we're not going to disparage that. There are going to be all sorts of pro players on those rosters, but
absolutely.
Over time, there is a difference between recruiting in the top 3 and recruiting 10, 11, 12.
No question. Absolutely. And that's the thing we're seeing right now is Bama, LSU, A&M, Georgia consistently, Mark, or above Florida. Now, look, when we say they're above Florida, what does that mean? Are they, 2 players above them? Are they 3? Are they 4? That's debatable. But to your point, Mark, in this league, as you know, if you're in the bottom of the top 10, and look, there are a lot of fans watching us right now that said, I'd give anything for my club to have a top 10 class once in my lifetime. But that's just the way things are in the SEC, right, Mark? If you're at the bottom of the league, at some point that catches up with you.
Will Muschamp routinely brought in classes between 15 and 20 in South Carolina and found himself in 8th, 9th, 10th place in the recruiting rankings.
That's right. Absolutely. So, and people don't like us to talk about that at times, but that's the way it is. And you've got to secure the talent. And if you struggle in doing that, at some point you're going to see it in your record, are you not?
Absolutely, you will. And in some of those key matchups that we talked about, as you looked at Alabama, LSU, and Georgia, I'm not going to consider those in any way automatic losses, but I do think that Florida is going to be a reasonable, decided underdog in those games as things stand right now. A lot's going to happen between now and October, November. But if they only drop one other game, then they're sitting at a pretty mediocre 8-4.
Yeah. But see, Mark, and I know we need to get going here, but the other reality of that, and this is what we talked about before, for a team like Florida, the difficult thing is not just the teams that you talked about, but it's the Missouri. If you go to Columbia and they've got a hot day and you don't, you can lose that game. So it's one of those things to where if Florida or any team, if you win those 50-50 games like that and are able to split the top games that you mentioned a few minutes ago, at that point, you're in contention for a lot of things.
Absolutely. Good stuff as always. Always appreciate the conversation. Always enjoy it, Brent. Brent Baird, First Coast News, College Sports Today, friend for quite a long time, and always appreciate, Brent, you helping us out here on the channel.
Mark, always a pleasure, my friend. Take care. Blessings on all of you.
Our guy, Brent Baird, First Coast News. I'm going to get to these 2 phone calls. I appreciate your patience in hanging on. Unfortunately, with our call-in system, the way we've got it set up now, you can, of course, listen to the show. We've got David Greenshield on the line. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Of course, David. Hello, David. You with us? Maybe David has left us. I don't hear him unless something has changed maybe with our internet issue, but everything seems to be in order. David, are you on the line? Okay. I'm going to move on to the next call, which is... don't know who this is in particular, but we've got somebody who wants to talk about the transfer portal. Looks like it's D-Rock Irish. D-Rock, how we doing tonight? Okay, maybe we had some kind of an issue when the internet went down. Let me try. I see David's call is still here. Let's try it one more time. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line? I think something disconnected when we had our little internet snafu, but it's showing that everything's lined up for us. Hello, David. You on the line? Got all of our... Hello, welcome to the Voice of College Football. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to shut down the call and we're going to start it over. And hopefully we'll be able to reconnect, and I apologize.
Thank you for calling Call-In Studios host and call screener line. Please enter your show number and enter your 6-digit PIN number. Welcome, host. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the Call-In Studio web interface.
We're okay. If somebody would like to call back, my apologies for that. 860-499-3332. Let's give it another shot. We've got 2 calls coming in. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line? There we go. David, sorry about that. Thanks for your perseverance.
Well, no, thank you, Mark. Hi, and how are you?
I'm doing well. What's up?
Good to see you out of the airport, my friend.
Oh, it's good to be out of the airport. It's good to have a shower. Good to get, some decent rest. it's good for all those things, and not have to spend like $18 for a meal at McDonald's.
Yeah, that's way too much for a Big Mac, Mark.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you a call. By the way, did you hear the news about Colt Brennan?
I did, and I read the article,
I could.
and yeah, that's very sad.
Now, he broke a lot of the records out there right after, what was it, Timmy Chang, who came right before him?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because they had that really good year. And what was it, 2007? They went undefeated and then went to the Sugar Bowl, if
That's
I'm not
right.
mistaken.
Yep.
And, was it Georgia that clobbered them, the Matthew Stafford team?
Yes, they did. They ran into Georgia. I believe the final was 42-10.
Okay. Yeah, that wasn't a good way to end the season, but yeah, he had broke a ton of records, I believe, at that time, if I'm not mistaken.
He had, and I don't remember exactly what those records were. Outside of, I believe once he left college football, he had the all-time passing yardage figure. I'm almost positive.
Yeah. And that was at a time too where the passing game wasn't quite on the level that it is, nowadays. Was that Jude Jones was his coach while he was at Hawaii?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I thought so. Yeah, I know Jones was, known for those big time passing games. But yeah, I noticed that. I was kind of caught me off guard. Younger guy too.
David, in 2006, Colt Brennan threw for 5,549 yards. He threw for 58 touchdowns and 12 picks.
Jeez. Well, he must have had, but 2007 was the big year for him.
Yeah, 2007 was.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, in 2007, his completion percentage went down almost 3 points. He threw for 1,200 less yards. He threw 20 less touchdown passes, 5 more interceptions.
Oh. Wow. Okay.
Which I would have never guessed.
Yeah, I know that. Right. Yeah, I know he was drafted in the NFL. I don't think he never had any type of a pro career, I don't think, right?
I don't believe he ever made a team. I know that he never threw a pass in the NFL.
Okay. Yeah, I think that it happens with, Timmy Chang was the same thing out of Hawaii, right? I don't think he was drafted or ever did much in the NFL either, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
Hey, Mark, I wanted to ask you, by the way, are you, some people had put into the chat about all-time great college football quarterbacks. Now that we're talking about quarterbacks, are you thinking about doing some features on all-time greatest position by position, by the way?
Truth be known, in looking at the best way to run this channel so that it's enjoyable for me, but most importantly, enjoyable for all of you and successful monetarily, that because it needs to support me, the best route for this channel may be for me to play on what I believe are, and what I think all of you confirm to be, some of my strengths and not necessarily my weaknesses, and analyze all sorts of things regarded to college football today and in the recent past in regards to, yes, ratings and rankings and comparing teams and doing all those things. Yes, so I'm going to be doing more of that.
Okay, let me give you my quick list. And
Sure.
I know that you started watching college football just a couple years before I did.
You like to bring that up, don't you, David?
digress.
Just to underline that I'm a few years older than you.
I say it jokingly, Mark. I'm sorry. Here we go. But I would put Peyton Manning would be in my top. This is no order. Peyton Manning would be in my top 10. Tommy Frazier. I believe I would put Deshaun Watson, Vince Young, Matt Leinart. Let's see, who am I missing? Tim Tebow. Would you put Cam Newton in your top 10, Mark?
Yeah, that's the eternal struggle of quantity versus quality. And his one season was phenomenal, and he carried that team on his back. and did all the things that we know. Heisman Trophy, the statistics are pretty ridiculous. And of course, the national championship. And I think that supersedes the volume. So I would put Cam Newton in my top 10. Yes.
Okay. Would you also put Joe Burrow?
Yeah, for the same reason. And he actually played a season before. And even though it did not compare to the senior season, it was still a major bowl win, a top 10 finish, and a pretty reasonably successful season. Yeah.
Okay. Now, considering that we had Watson, would you also have to put Lawrence?
I remember watching, after watching Deshaun Watson win that game against Alabama, and considering that with an inferior roster the year before, that he put up 500, almost 500 total yards against Alabama and put up 40 points and against a great modern defense. And then the next year in 2016 comes back against Alabama, is down by 2 touchdowns, battles back, wins the game on the final drive, does all the things that he did to pull off, again, another stunning performance in the national championship game. I remember in the aftermath of that game thinking, is this the best quarterback in college football history?
Wow. Really? I would, that's, I mean, he had 2 incredible seasons, and they got to back-to-back championship games, won a national championship. But if you think about it, didn't Lawrence essentially do those same things in 18 and 19? Right?
He did.
And then made the playoff even in 20.
He did. And I, as you probably know from having these kind of conversations with me, and it's difficult because football is arguably the ultimate team sport, try to differentiate, okay, these are what the accomplishments are versus can I somehow in my mind take this player out of this system surrounded by all this talent, and how good is he versus this other player who may have had a different situation. Now, their situations were very comparable. Of course, they played for the same program during the same era, during the same span of 4 years. But
Right.
From an accomplishment standpoint, they're almost identical. And if anything, Lawrence lost less games. I'm guessing, let's see, Deshaun Watson, and of course, in 2016, they only lost 1 game, won the national championship in 2015. The one loss was in the national championship game. And the prior season in 2014, he got hurt about halfway through the season, could not finish the season. And so however you want to evaluate that season as his freshman season, it was outstanding statistically, but he only made it through about half the season, and they ended up losing 4 games. He didn't, but he actually had one of those, if you believe in quarterback record, he had one of those statistical anomalies that should be taken off his record. He got hurt in a Georgia Tech game, like in the first quarter, and they lost the game, and he didn't really play much of the game, but from a starting standpoint, got pegged with the loss. Yeah, you're right. Trevor Lawrence accomplished what Deshaun Watson, and I would guess, I don't really need to guess, I can almost guarantee that Trevor Lawrence's statistics look better than Deshaun Watson's from a completion percentage standpoint and from an interception standpoint, because Deshaun Watson in his final season did throw 17 interceptions.
Okay. Now, I started watching college football in the mid-'80s. This guy was right before my time. I did see him in the NFL, unfortunately, as a Browns fan. Would John Elway be close to your top 10?
See, what's difficult there is statistically, if I pulled up his stats right now, they're not going to come close to anybody else that we're talking about that's played in the last 15 years. But we both know.
True, but it's a different era.
Yeah. So somebody needs to come up with what they've done in baseball and come up with some type of I can't think of the analytic, but a measuring stick that adjusts. It's There's some type of adjusted statistic in baseball where they can more accurately compare eras. Because if you're throwing for 2,000 yards and you lead the league in the NFL in 1965, well, that's statistically in a conversion just as good as the season is throwing for 4,800 yards today versus your contemporaries. So for Elway, and we know that he went on to the NFL, and he's arguably probably in that top 5 to 10 range all time in the NFL.
I agree.
But he did not accomplish, from a win standpoint, accomplished basically nothing at Stanford. Could barely get them to a bowl
that's what
game.
I was going to say. Yeah.
Those teams weren't good at all.
Was he the quarterback on the famous play, Mark? The band?
Yeah, in 82.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So
I think that might have been his last game, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it, Mark?
Yeah.
He played a bowl game after it.
I just pulled up his numbers, and they're relatively they're actually more impressive than I thought they'd be. These are pretty high percentage completion seasons for back then. 65.4, 58.5, and 64.7 as a senior. His TD to interception ratios were 6-3, 27-11, 20-13, and 24-12. So as a Buckeyes fan, and again, this would have been right before you started watching, that 82 team, I remember him coming to Columbus, and this was part of an Ohio State 3-game losing streak after they had won their first 2 games of the season, and Mike Tomczak was starting his first season at quarterback as a sophomore, and Ohio State had a horrible 3-game run against Florida State, Stanford, and Wisconsin, and then they rallied with 7 consecutive wins and were just a much better team by the end of the season and finished 9-3 and in the top 10 or 11 in the country. But Elway went to Columbus in the third of those 3 losses, or maybe it was the second. Anyway, actually, now that I rethink it, it was the first of the 3 losses. But I remember this like it was yesterday. It was on ABC, and as was typical of the day, Ohio State had like a 4-point lead, and they tried to milk the clock and play too conservatively in the fourth quarter. And then Elway gets his hands on the ball and takes him down the field and throws a game-winning touchdown with 45 seconds left in the game or whatever. But that Stanford team that beat an Ohio State team that wound up top 12 in the country only went 5-6. That year, and
correct me if I'm wrong, though, Mark. Art Schleister, your favorite player, went out to Palo Alto the year before and then beat him in Stanford, if I'm not mistaken.
24-19. I remember that game very well as well. But that was a difficult game for an Ohio State team that ended up tying for the Big Ten championship and winning a bowl game, finishing 9-3. Not a great team, but top again. They finished 12 or 13 in the rankings. And Stanford, for those 3 starting seasons for Elway, they went 6-5, 4-7 the year that Schleister beat them on the West Coast, and then the team that beat Ohio State in Columbus only went 5-6. So Elway had a sub 500 record as a starting quarterback at Stanford.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, well, it shows you that. You probably think at the time he was not surrounded with, let's say, a boatload of talent at the time. I don't know if that. Yeah. By the way, Earl Bruce always struggled to beat Wisconsin, as you remember, Mark. Remember, he had some bad losses to Wisconsin.
He did, and ironically, it started out with a 59-0 win his first season against Wisconsin, and they shut them out 21-0 the next year. Then after that, they lost to him in 81, 82. They did beat him in 83, but then the Rose Bowl season of 84, they lost to them. They lost to them the week before the Michigan game in 85, when after they, as you well know, beat Iowa, number 1 ranked Iowa team in the rain in Columbus. were in control of the Big
Yep.
Ten and lost to Wisconsin at home the week before the Michigan game. So they lost to Wisconsin. That would be 4 out of 5 years. Yeah, with Earl Bruce on
Yeah,
the sideline.
yeah. Right, yeah, after they beat Iowa with Chuck Long and Ronnie Harmon, Larry Station, and that really good Iowa team. Hey, Mark, I wanted to ask you, I didn't see on Steve Gates this week, but he released his rankings of like how his power rankings for the year that
Yes.
I know you've talked about in the past.
Yep.
Okay.
I was
Now,
invited to
do
come
you
on, but I was
release
stuck in an airport.
Yeah, I take it that probably wouldn't have been ideal. But let me ask you, do you do something similar later in the year? Or are you going to?
Certainly the introduction of the Steve Dace points method has caused me to think what I could create that would be similar, not too similar, but would still be meaningful in some type of measuring stick. But I haven't necessarily given it enough thought.
Okay.
Was there something
No,
in
just a
particular
thought,
you
because
had in
I-
mind?
Well, I like the one thing I will say about his rankings is because I've seen like rosters being ranked according to, let's say, Rivals or the 24/7 Sports Composite, based on, let's say, the last 3 years worth of recruiting or something like that. I think that the one thing that I kind of like that he does, though, is he does factor in. I think he's got the factoring in of returning starters coming back in, how productive they were the year before. And it could have been a 3-star that was a productive player the year before that they've got back, coming back for, let's say, his junior, maybe even senior season. And I kind of like the way he factors that in. I think you've talked to him about that before, if I'm not mistaken.
We have, and he actually, come to think of it, texted me today and asked for us to get together next Tuesday. So we're going to discuss it next Tuesday. And what he is doing there, as you well know, is he is measuring talent, the ceiling of that particular team. So therefore, if a 5-star falls flat on his face, they are still being ranked as a 5-star because they're still on the roster. They are still capable of fulfilling that potential at some point, theoretically. But to your point,
Right.
the 2-star, the 3-star that turns out to be J.J. Watt, or I think his classic example last year was Tanner Morgan, who was like a 2-star, but he's a 30 touchdown passer in the Big Ten a couple of years later. Well, then he is then elevated to, and I remember asking the question, okay, how do you quantify that? If a guy suddenly goes from being off the radar 2-star to 1,000-yard rusher, okay, what is that? Is that a 4-star? What is that? So he did have a way to give that some kind of measurement, especially that's difficult as you would think at offensive line. Okay, if the guy's a capable, let's say he's not good enough to be an all-conference performer, but he came from oblivion to become a starter at Wisconsin. So he must be pretty good and completely outplayed his recruiting ranking. So how do you measure that? But yes, he's measuring potential. And the thing that I noticed in his rankings, so he sent me his rankings last week, and I was preparing to be on Tuesday, and I remembered this from last year, and I never quite pinned him down on this. I thought it was rather odd that both UCLA and Cal were in the top 15. And I thought, how does that add up? Because Cal is nowhere
He had
close.
UCLA high.
Yeah, that's what I say. UCLA and Cal,
high,
both of them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Both of them in the top 15. I think Cal's 14. And I'm thinking, okay, UCLA, I kind of get it. They usually bring in a class that's around 20th in the nation, even though they've underachieved. But Cal, I'd have to go back at their recruiting classes, but they're not recruiting anywhere close to 15th in the country. So I don't know where that.
Right.
And it's not like they're a Wisconsin or a Michigan State of D'Antonio's time that's turning 45th rated classes into 10-2 teams either. So I don't know how that's being calculated to come up with that conclusion.
Well, see, one of the things, and he uses the term, I think you've heard him use this before, developmental program.
Mhm.
And I think the one thing about it being is that when you're at an Iowa or you're at, let's say, a program, maybe like a Cal or UCLA, a mid-tier program in any conference that's recruiting not a lot of 4 or 5 stars and maybe just recruiting a fair amount of 3 stars, there's probably a good chance that 3 stars are going to stay longer. I maybe you've seen this stat before, Mark, that there's a high percentage that 4 or 5 stars turn pro earlier and go to the NFL. That's why I think obviously you see so much turnover on an Ohio State roster, an Alabama roster, the high-end rosters in the country. So I think that when you have, let's say, those type programs, that's why they can kind of like peak maybe every 4 years if they have a senior-laden club that, let's say, is coming off a nice 10-2 year, and they've got, 14, 15 starters coming back. Isn't that kind of like what people thought of Minnesota coming into last year?
Yes.
Okay.
And in particular with Minnesota, they had all 5 starting offensive linemen coming back. They had Tanner Morgan coming back. They had Mohamed Ibrahim coming back, and they had can't think of the wide receiver not Tyler Johnson. Tyler Johnson left to Tampa Bay, but they still brought back Chris Autman-Bell and Bateman, Rashad Bateman.
Yep.
But their defense was awful.
I mean,
and Morgan went into the tank.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, I mean, it's an interesting thing, and I don't know if it's something you're going to get to down the road. I just wanted to run it by you.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that play around in my head in regards to how I can uniquely but effectively and meaningfully present some of these analytics to everyone. I did a comparison that I never got to in regards to presenting it, but looking at, 2 things come to mind. I went through the entire SEC for the entire decade and compared recruiting rankings to final record to see who were the underachievers and overachievers. And I also went through every conference, and I went through the last 20 years and went through preseason and postseason AP rankings to see who's being over-evaluated consistently. Is there a program or several that are being either undervalued or overvalued consistently in the preseason?
Yeah, you know what, Mark? Tony Gerdeman over at Buckeye Scoop, they just did a list where I think they put it online of the 10 most overrated programs in college football, and they based it upon what you just said, preseason rankings as compared to final rankings.
Okay.
So that's interesting stuff. All right, my friend. Hey, it's good to have you back. Always a pleasure to talk college football. You going to run the live stream again back on Friday?
We will, and we'll be here a number of times tomorrow with Miami and Nebraska live streams.
Okay, my friend. You have a good evening now.
Thank you, David.
Take care now.
D-Rock Irish, so patient. Here he is.
Hey.
How you doing tonight?
Hey, Mark. Hey, I'm doing okay. I guess I'm following suit behind Brent and David Greenshield. For a quick second, I was able to talk to David online, your line, when the internet connection must have failed. We were talking with one another.
That is
and
crazy.
Says, I'll try to give he says, I think I'm going to try to give Mark a call. And I said, I'll follow suit as well, too. So, but I follow up with 2 very knowledgeable guys, and especially with Brent. I did enjoy his thoughts on the Thursday games and, having some SEC games maybe on Thursdays, to try to go ahead and promote, the SEC along with some of the schools. And how ideal would it be to have college football 7 days a week? I don't know. I don't know if that would be something that's down the road or not, but with the MAC on Tuesdays, and those Thursday games that he's proposing, and Friday with the Pac-12 games, and then Saturdays and with some Sunday games, that would be very interesting.
Well, with what happened in the NFL this year, with a number of games being not canceled but moved, I think the NFL, I know that the NFL played games on every day of the week this past season, and it caused me to think in college football. Now, I'm not proposing this to happen, but it could be worked out to where if there was the right rotation of games put into the right format, that there could be games every day of the week. And I don't mean that the MAC would always have to play on Tuesday and Wednesday. I mean that you could have SEC and Big Ten games on Wednesday and Thursday, because all you have to do is stagger the schedule by at least one day. And let's say you start the season and you have, let's say in the Big Ten, you've got 14 teams, so they're playing 7 games. And well, to start the season, they're playing out of conference, so they're playing 14 games. And you put them all at all different times during the week on different days. And then for the teams that played on Wednesday, you just make sure that they've got something close to a full week. They either play the next Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and you could fill up. It wouldn't be that difficult to fill up the entire college football season with games every day. You could do it.
Yeah, it would certainly be interesting to go ahead and have that kind of a look. I actually was looking forward to watching some NFL games on Tuesday and Wednesday. So, yeah, it would be interesting. Another item, more of a thought or a comment than a question, the consistency factor. I know you mentioned it, and I think Brent mentioned it as well, too, previously. Consistency throughout the entire college football with an overall commissioner, especially with equity and scheduling. And I know you just made a comment a little while back that, what's the sense of having a schedule 10 years out? What's the relevancy of having a college football schedule 10 years out rather than going ahead and having a schedule produced, let's say, in May, and you know what's coming down the pike every college football season. And I thought you were spot on with that one, Mark.
So for example, D-Rock Irish, I like to pick on Baylor. I'll just make this quick example. Baylor has not played an out-of-conference game against a ranked opponent since 1997. It's been 24 years since they have played a ranked opponent outside the conference. I looked at USC. I just grabbed USC, just thinking, okay, they play tough schedules, but there might be teams with more than this. But USC, during that same span of time, has played 24 games against ranked opponents out of conference. Baylor's played none. Now, how is that fair?
Yeah.
So
I know that you brought up that scenario. Yeah, I thought you brought up that scenario several times too, and that's kind of stuck in my head too, as far as Baylor and their scheduling and how they work things out. And I go back to what you're saying too. There's got to be some equity issues in the scheduling. I think there should be a commissioner out there that can kind of lay it down and say, this is what we're going to go ahead and do, and everybody's on the same page. Because just like, and I hate to use this as a comparison, but even with COVID, we're all over the board, state by state, dealing with COVID, and all over the board on how we're handling college football scheduling. We're just shooting from the hip, it seems like, and a lot of issues, including college football. So, I agree with you on that one. Couple of questions here. I know, well, I'm not saying I know, but I keep on hearing that there are several coaches out there, whether or not it's a defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, or even a head coach, that recruiting is not one of their strengths out there. Do you think the transfer portal is going to change the recruiting system the way that we see it now?
So do you mean, is it going to change the rules, or is it going to change coaching staff's approach to recruiting?
Well, when you brought up that second one, it could be both, even just the way that they're doing stuff. I'm hearing there's some coaches out there that are actually just being assigned to the transfer portal. to kind of keep a eye on what's coming through in and out of the portal, and they've got a person assigned to that. At least that's what I'm hearing out there. I don't know some specific
That's
teams
correct.
or not.
Yeah.
So it could be both. Yeah.
Because
So,
basically, if you think about it, college football teams, if they're serious about winning, need to take kind of a strategy like the NFL does with free agency, where once the free agent market opens, they have to have a complete scouting department, a number of scouts that scout the whole league because that's how you approach free agency. You want to know, okay, well, we need a guard. Okay, there's 8 available. Who's the best and at what price? And so who's the best value? So the same thing needs to happen in college football, where there's hundreds. It's past 1,000 players now that have been in the transfer portal. So who are these players? And there's a lot less to go on. So the scouting has to be even more keen in evaluating these players, because there's less material, there's less of a track record and tape on them than there is at the NFL level.
Mm-hmm. Right. And going along the same lines, do you think the scholarships might go away if that image and likeness program might come into effect with these college football players, that if they start getting paid for the image and likeness, that perhaps some of these colleges are going to start maybe taking a step back a little bit on the number of scholarships that are out there too, because they are getting a free education and free textbooks and dorms and they're getting all that. Now they're going to go ahead and get paid for image and likeness. Do you think that scholarships might be cut back a little bit because of that down the road? Maybe due to dollars and money and revenue coming in from the colleges?
Well, I would hate to see us go in that direction, because as soon as you mentioned that, I started to connect dots and go further and further down that road. And as Pandora's box continues to be flown wide open, it almost would get to the point where we would say, playing college football, that's your degree. That is why you're at the school. You can major in college football playing because you are looking to earn a living and gain a skill that's going to earn you money as a professional, and you have chosen college football, and you don't have to go to class because this is your class. Which I think would be horrible. Mm-hmm. I don't like it, but I don't think as it's currently, and we're going to know more of what this is going to look like 5 years down the road, this name, image, and likeness. It just doesn't seem like it would be enough for every player that is currently receiving a scholarship at all these universities to supplement them to that degree. Because the second string left tackle at Arkansas is going to be able to capitalize to a certain extent, because, hey, there are Arkansas football fans that are crazy, and he may be able to sit down during the off season at Joe Blow's car wash or car dealership and sign autographs and make some money on the side, which would be tremendous now. But if he doesn't have a scholarship, I can't see him signing enough autographs at $5 a pop to be able to pay for his education.
Good point. Excellent point. And I know I'm kind of throwing a crystal ball at you and saying what's the future going to look like, but it's always interesting to go ahead and hear your comments and what your thoughts might be as far as what the future holds. And here's something else, and I'm kind of digging in the weeds on this one. We had 2 players from Notre Dame that have transferred now to the portal. One is going to UCF, and the other one is going to FSU.
Yep.
And there was talk on one of the boards out there in regards to playbooks from the previous team being shared with the other teams. Do you think that's going to be prevalent out there? And if so, is it just more of these schools? I mean, it seems as though that there's so many teams out there that are being affected by the transfer portal, but that it's becoming more common, and that could actually happen with the team playbooks being taken by the players and actually going to another team and sharing the playbook.
Sure. Well, D-Rock, I got to say that in watching these spring games, it came across my mind that, those large boards that are held up on the sideline to call in plays where they have 4 pictures of 4 different people or 4 mascots or whatever the signals are for the offense or the defense. And then they have, a couple are decoys and you don't know which is which, that those are going to have to be changed out because the player leaving, for example, using your Irish case in point, of course, play Florida State. And that's where Dylan, what's his last name? Dylan Robbins? Dylan
Gibbons.
Yes, Dylan
I think
Gibbons.
it's Gibbons.
Leaves Notre Dame to play Florida State. He played for Notre Dame against Florida State last year. Now he's going to play Florida State against Notre Dame in game 1. So to your point, would he be able to take a playbook? Did he have a playbook in his possession? Sure he did. Do they take that out of his hands? Could he have copied it, downloaded it? And I'm sure that playbook isn't necessarily just a binder like it used to be. I'm sure it's electronically given to each player that they can pull it up on their phone or their iPad. And now they have possession of it. Can they take it with them? That's a great point.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring that up, and I don't know, crazier things than that can happen out there, and we've heard that too. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up for maybe some off-season coaches need to go ahead and start changing up part of the playbook or whatever with all these transfers going on out there. And one last question, Mark, because I know it's running late. Thoughts on the Notre Dame Billboard program recruiting? Have you been aware of what's been going on out there? I know you've been stuck in an airport for a few days, but Notre Dame's been recruiting or going through the recruiting motions by having current players and their billboards are placed up in their home state or home city. I don't know if you've been aware of that or not.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, I might DM you. I might send you something, as far as what's been out there on Twitter. And that seems to be a big recruiting point now for the Irish, that they're putting billboards, huge billboards out, like on the interstate or on the, state roads. And their current players, they're actually going ahead and letting people know that the kids came from that city or from that state. And that seems to be a recruiting tool that they're starting to use. So if I get any information, I'll just DM you on that one so you can take a look at that. But that's been out there on Twitter land.
Yeah, please do. Please do. All right, D-Rock.
Okay, well, yep, it was good talking with you, and welcome home. And I'm glad that you're back from that cluster.
Thank you so much, D-Rock. I appreciate it. You have a good night.
Oh, okay, take care. Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
All right. Here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, on Thursday night, we'll be here at 5, 7, and 8. 5 o'clock Eastern time, we've got the Wholesome One to talk Miami football live. 7 o'clock, Cam Underwood, State of the U, Miami live. Some people question at times why I've got 2 Miami shows on the same night, but we've got 2 extremely capable and talented guests, contributors, and that's when they can make it. Therefore, we have the doubleheader of Miami on Thursday night, again, 5 and 7 p.m. Eastern time. Nebraska live, 8 o'clock Eastern time. I am asking all of you who support us here, please share the links And if you know you've got a live stream coming up, grab the link and share it out on social media. Let your friends know, your family know that we're here talking college football. And if you can't find the link or don't know the link or don't want to go to another window and grab the link, it's easy just to say MarkRogersTV.com. That will send everybody to the front page of my YouTube channel, MarkRogersTV.com. All right, again, 5, 7, and 8 o'clock. Live streams coming up tomorrow night. Please share the links. Understand that we've got a number of promotional opportunities for you to help us build what we've got going on here. We've got Manscaped that I'm personally using so I can verify and I can promote and endorse that product. It's clean, it's smooth, it's tremendous. 20% off Manscaped. So go to manscaped.com so you get the 20% off plus the free shipping. Use the promo code MARK1. Also, of course, shop Amazon. This one to me is just huge because if you know anything about YouTube, you know that I'm not going to earn enough revenue on YouTube to keep this going, that we need alternate revenue streams. That includes Amazon, and knowing how many people shop on Amazon and how often, I just see this as a huge opportunity for you not to change in any way or need to contribute in any way financially. But if you just use the link in the description section from Amazon, and you basically just enter the site, you enter Amazon using my link. Therefore, I'm given credit for the sale, but doesn't cost you anything. And it's the same exact shopping experience. You can bypass the item that's there. You're going to click on the link. You're going to see like a football helmet. Go right by it. Go to the search bar. Do everything that you typically do on Amazon. Just please use the link that we provide right there. We're also on Patreon. We had somebody join a couple of days ago. Appreciate that. 16 cents a day, Patreon. We've got a live stream, exclusive live stream coming up on Saturday to talk about all the things that we have planned here at the Voice of College Football. All right, everyone, we will see you tomorrow at 5 Eastern Time for Miami Football Talk. 5, 7, and 8 live on Thursday. See you.